Miss Finian with Gilded Age Part 2. We are looking at the same essential question: in what ways, good and bad, is life changing after the Civil War and during the Gilded Age? And we're also on Learning Target 1.4, explain the causes and consequences of Gilded Age politics. Awesome. All right, so let's get started. First, we want to start with laissez-faire, and what does that term mean? This term is on Quizlet, and it's one of your vocabulary words, and it basically means that the government did very little economically in the early 1900s and late 1800s. The main duties of the federal government were to deliver mail, maintain a national military, collect taxes and tariffs, and conduct a foreign policy, so relations with other countries. So other than that, the federal government didn't do a whole lot, and they most certainly did not regulate businesses. So there's your clicker questions, so of course you can get those in. And at this time, remember we talked about the Gilded Age was a very corrupt part of our history where on the outside we look wealthy, but on the inside everything's falling apart. So at this time we have the rise of political machines. And a political machine is an organized group of people that control the activities of a political party. So they give voters services they need, and the machine would then win and control the city. A city boss was the head of the political machines, and they controlled jobs in police, fire, sanitation departments. And basically, if you look at this picture over here, it says all politics center around the boss. So usually political machines were very corrupt. They would take money to fund large construction projects and funnel that money back into their own pockets. One way political machines got by is that they loved immigrants. Why? Because immigrants typically never voted. So what political machines did was they tried to sway the votes by bribing them with intimidation and also bribing them with jobs. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in class. They also used their power to rig elections, and they became wealthy from getting money from illegal payments. They also controlled the police force. So this is a really, really corrupt period of time in our history. The most corrupt political boss was Boss Tweed, and his full name is William N. Tweed. He's the head of the most powerful political machine, Tammany Hall, and he led what they called the Tweed Ring, which was his political machine that he led from 1869 to 1871. Tell me what that squeaking noise is. In class, I'll give you a stamp. Okay, so he also stole $30 to $200 million. He was, like I said, one of the most powerful, and he's one of the political machines that helped build the Brooklyn Bridge that connected Manhattan to Brooklyn, but he spent millions of dollars on it, and a lot of that went to his pocket. Here's some pictures of him. This is someone who created a Facebook of Boss Tweed, talking about basically all the power he has. And then this is the most famous political cartoon, and we'll discuss this political cartoon in class that talks about Boss Tweed and a money bag for his head. So, like I said, he was over Tammany Hall. He was a democratic political machine, and we had one of the most famous political cartoonists of all time, Thomas Nast. He was very critical of machines, and he was one of the only people that would speak out on these political machines. And Boss Tweed was known to say, "I don't care what anybody says about me," but he did not like seeing these pictures of himself in the paper. And later, when he escaped to Spain, the only way that he was caught was because people had seen Thomas Nast's political cartoons in the paper, and that's how he was caught and brought back to jail, where he eventually passed away. So some other things that we want to talk about, and we'll come back to inventions on our next video, is the rise of big business. Corporations are, it's the beginning of corporations. Corporations are owned by many people, and by law they're treated as a person. So it makes it easy for a person to start a business, because if the business fails, they will not be sued. And a lot of those people who own corporation own shares of stock. Stock is basically a way to spread out financial risk and raise money. It also allows a large workforce. So before the Civil War, there's high costs for small businesses. We have fixed first operating costs. And pre-Civil War, there was high operating costs. That means it costs a lot of money to pay people to work. And low fixed costs are like rent. A lot of companies would just shut down because they could keep the rent going and they didn't want to have to pay their workers. But after the Civil War, for corporations, they had low operating costs because they didn't pay people any money and their fixed costs were high, so they had to stay open. The advantages of this for big businesses was that they were allowed to operate in economic, not allowed, but they were able to operate in economic recessions. They produced more fast and cheap, and small businesses just couldn't compete because they had high operating costs and low fixed costs. One other thing that at this time that was part of big business was a new invention called the Bessemer process, which was a faster and cheaper way to produce steel. And steel was used in railroads, farm equipment, canned goods, and it also is going to help create skyscrapers. And with this new Bessemer process, you're going to see the rise of big business moguls. We call them the men who built America. Andrew Carnegie being one of them, who he made a fortune in steel in the late 1800s from the Bessemer process, and he was also a philanthropist, which means he gave most of his money away. And then you have John D. Rockefeller, who's an industrialist who made a fortune in the oil refining industry. Other ones include J.P. Morgan, who started U.S. Steel from Carnegie Steel and other companies. He's the first billion-dollar company, and he's going to bail the United States out of the economy on more than one occasion. And that's it for today, guys. So hope you got all these notes, and I'll see you in class.